can you believe that it has been 10 years since Status Quo released their album Aquostic, Stripped Bare, which featured new versions of some of their classic songs and a few obscure ones reinvented in a new style. There was a string section, there were backing singers, there was an accordion player, there was the gig at the Roundhouse, and there was also that cover. The album was a long time coming. Back in 1989, Francis Rossi and Rick Parfitt, promoting their Perfect Remedy album, appeared on Steve Wright in the Afternoon on Radio 1, where, with 2 acoustic guitars in hand, they performed a few select tracks, including Caroline, Railroad, and From a Jack to a King. Many years later, they'd find themselves on the set of an advertisement for the Australian supermarket Coles. They'd already done Down, Down, Prices Are Down with huge foam fingers at Abbey Road Studios, but this one was a new version of their song Whatever You Want, with adapted lyrics to suit the brand. This was acoustic, and following this, they recorded and released Aquostic, Stripped Bare, which it was a huge success. It was one of those times where Quo released something and it just captures the imagination of the record-buying public. Not just hardcore fans. We've seen it before with Anniversary Waltz and Rock Till You Drop, with the publicity surrounding that. We've seen it with Don't Stop. And very recently, in the last sort of 20 years, The Party Ain't Over Yet, following the appearance on Coronation Street and that sort of thing. This was one of those times where what they were doing just absolutely exploded into the stratosphere. And I would say part of the success, one part of it, would be the album cover, which certainly caught a lot of interest because it featured Francis and Rick on the front cover, stripped bare, for want of a better phrase, with acoustic guitars covering their modesty. And this photograph that they used for this cover, and the band did it too, it was all taken by Bryan Adams. Yeah, that Bryan Adams, which is really cool. I love the color scheme of the photograph and the way in which on the album cover it kind of, it's very kind of somber and artistic, if you will. That sort of monotone sepia feel. It certainly caught a lot of attention. So looking at the musical content on this album, we have Pictures of Matchstick Men, which opens up. I mean, their first hit single, done in this new style. I love the kind of usage of the strings, and then the guitars kick in, and you get to hear the harmonies of Francis, Rick, and other singers there. And it's a beautiful rendition, which I'm sure for some people is, for them, better than the original 1960s version. Then we go on to Down the Dustpipe. Again, I love the kind of sing-along vibe of this album, and we get that with Down the Dustpipe and Na 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 from Dog of Two Head, which that's an unusual thing. And I think when I first heard this album was coming out, I thought it's just going to be like a rehashing of the greatest hits, right? It's going to be one of those albums, basically a compilation. They've been releasing compilations every 7 years or so, and we were due one. And I thought, this is going to be that. And in actual fact, by picking Na Na Na, they picked a song that suited that down to the ground. And I love the bass on that, the kind of marching thing, yeah, the do 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 do. It's sort of almost countrified in it too. Then Paper Plane, which again sounded good and needed to be on here, I guess. All the Reasons from the Pile Driver album. I mean, again, you think about it, we're going to get onto the Roundhouse gig in a moment, but there's going to be people who would have bought this album because they liked the sound of the songs, what they were hearing, and there would be lots of familiar songs, but things like All the Reasons, someone might think, well, they wrote that for this, or it's someone else's. No, it's Status Quo. And that's one of the reasons why I really appreciated this album, was we got to get some kind of spotlight on the songwriting that's been going on for the past 50 plus years. Then the next track, Reason for Living, originally on Hello. Again, nice. I like the accordion on that. And the one of the singles that came out was the next track, And It's Better Now, originally featured on Hello. And for me, I never liked the original. I don't know. It just didn't seem to suit the rest of the album. But with here, what they've done is they've piled it on with lots of harmonies, and it just suits that stripped back approach. And I know that when this album came out, I was looking around Twitter one day and they played it on Radio 2. And someone said, oh, they're trying to channel Neil Young or somebody like that. And what I found interesting was, in some cases, some of the artists that were being referenced by people who were hearing this Quo material were probably, Neil Young isn't one of them, obviously, but some of them would have written and recorded the stuff they're referring to or thinking it sounds like after Quo did this. These compositions go back decades, and that's the beauty of it. We had to have Caroline, and in some ways we had to have Softer Ride. I mean, it just suits it, doesn't it, with the strings, doing some of the guitar riffs and stuff. Then we have Claudie, obviously gives it a nice little country vibe. Break the Rules, again, country kind of vibe going on. Down Down, Quo's only sole credited number one single in the UK. The bonus tracks, which were featured in the middle of the album, Mystery Song, where we get that, I love that kind of orchestral string thing with the fierce da da da, that's brilliant. I thought it was really, really good. I love the space that you get with the production. It's a really airy production. You listen to it with headphones, and it's not the balls to the wall, four to the floor rock and roll that they've been doing for the last 50 plus years, but I just love the experience of this album, and that one in particular, plus Little Lady kind of tacked onto the end of Mystery Song, the way we get the lingering string section sort of, and then we go into Little Lady. They've omitted the kind of musical intro at the beginning of Little Lady in some part. I think there's a little tiny fragment of it there, but that's good, because imagine, some of these songs like Down Down and a few others we could mention, they are like sing-along, strum-along versions, whereas when they try and do something that kind of reinvents the song a little bit, sometimes it doesn't need it. Sometimes it just works in that because they would have written it originally on guitar, acoustic guitar, just strumming away. Sometimes it works, but to reinvent it is really cool. We go on to Rain, which I think when you hear Rain and how stripped back it is, it really is stripped back, and we get Andy's harmonica in there as well. I mean, Andy plays a lot of instruments on this album, I think. You get that sort of stripped back thing. I get the impression that the hardcore fans would have liked it if the whole album was like Rain. And I think I read somewhere that they weren't sure it was going to work in that setting. And it does, because it's sort of that bluesy stripped back. I'm going to use the phrase stripped back a lot, but it's that bluesy feel that really works for this track. Then Rockin' All Over the World. And it's just a strum-along version, really, isn't it? In a slightly lower key. Again and again is that classic single from 1978. And they reinvented it. They pretty much changed it, didn't they? I love Gerant's accordion on this. They sort of made it a kind of cool and chill, and you could imagine having a party on a beach or something and singing like, again, like it's really cool. And I like Rick's vocal on that as well. Whatever You Want is track 18 with the bonus tracks included. And with Whatever You Want, it is one of those reinventions that's like, it's about time, isn't it? I remember seeing a comment, and I seeing all these comments while the Roundhouse gig was going on, and someone said, that's the folkiest version of Whatever You Want I've ever heard. And that was meant as a compliment, I'm sure, because I love the way it kind of builds up and we get the drums and the percussion there, ba-da-ba-da-da, ba-da-ba-da, like, and it just builds up and we hear the strings, and then the guitars come in, it's the da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's not a complete copy of the original, but it just takes segments of it and puts it into this new sphere. It's almost like demixing it, I guess, like deconstructing it, taking the bits that work and putting it in there. And then it just kind of turns into a strum along again. It kind of follows the rhythm and the form of the song. Then we have What You're Proposing into rock and roll. Again, you don't really see rock and roll a lot on these sort of albums. It doesn't get mentioned a lot. In fact, I can imagine there were a lot of fans who were kind of disappointed when it came out because it wasn't going da 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 rock and roll, like, because it was more melancholy. It kind of suits it though, and with those long guitar lines, it suits the strings and it suits everything else. That is probably one that if they'd done it with just a couple of acoustics, Steve Wright in the Afternoon style, perhaps it wouldn't have worked, or they wouldn't have been able to have stretched it to the full song. Now, when it came out, Don't Drive My Car was used as an example of how they've completely thrown out the rule book and changed things about. The thing with Don't Drive My Car, I think Rick described it as like a Django Reinhardt type thing. And it is, because I love that intro. It does not sound like... it's kind of unconventional for Quo. It's like completely on the other scale, It's like they've completely embraced this field that they're in. And I guess in some ways, I always found the original, that intro is very unusual. And so in order to take something that's similar, they've almost done very similar with this. It's like, this is unusual for the band to do this. And again, Rick's vocal on it, I think, is really cool. Just the amalgamation. I mean, if you heard it on the radio, you would say, well, that doesn't sound like Status Quo, does it? No, but it was cool. It was exactly the right thing to kind of emphasize. There are going to be songs on this album that reinvent the original composition, like this one, Whatever You Want, and again. It's great, I think. Then we go on to Margarita Time. Then we go on to Burning Bridges, which, again, suits that accordion sound. I know some people questioned why there was an accordion there. And I think for songs like this, it works really well. And I know when I was watching the Roundhouse gig on the BBC with my nan, she'd obviously heard that jig before, because it's based on a traditional thing, and like the style of music and things. She said, it's like country dancing, like they're sort of doing country dancing stuff now. And I thought that was a really cool way of saying, like, they've opened this up to more than just the hardcore Quo audience. I mean, the Burning Bridges reinvention isn't going to be to everybody's taste, and I'm sure it will be used at some point as like a stick to beat them with, because it's very light. But then the original was very light and very commercial, and it was also very successful. So to take that, and certainly I think it emphasizes that, the accordion emphasizes that jig and like how good it was. I think it only goes to demonstrate as well just how many bangers to use a youth phrase, that Quo have had over the years. It's not just your rocking all over the world and your downs and your whatever you want. You've got what you're proposing. You've got Margarita Time. You've got Burning Bridges. You've got, these are songs that reached out and were huge hits in their day. And as always, people forget and then they get reminded again. And this interpretation of Burning Bridges is one which, I think is really lively. And I can imagine being at the Roundhouse gig, it looked like great fun. Everybody having a great time. Then the album finishes, strangely, and this is a strange decision, but I can see why they've done it, with Rock Till You Drop. Rock Till You Drop, which again, like rock and roll is another one where it's like, I'm expecting like full-on Quo boogie, like a one-man band type thing, and then you get what Rock Till You Drop is. But again, it works. It was scooping up a single from the past. They must have looked at like a list of singles and gone, well, that will work because it's an Andy Bown composition that was kind of soft anyway. And again, it worked in this thing because that stripped back approach, like it wasn't anything grand about it. It just, I'm trying to think of another phrase. It just worked, in my opinion. So that is the track listing. They did also record Rolling Home as well, the 1986 single, which was included in the digital version at least. And I think there are other ones out there, although now I kind of confuse it a little bit with Aquostic 2, which we'll talk about in a year or two's time. They then did this gig to launch the album at the Roundhouse, which was broadcast on Radio 2. It was on BBC Red Button. It's been on BBC 4 as well. And like I've said before, it was just one of those moments where you go, look at how many bangers, even like the most obscure stuff. It was like, as a fan, you want people to hear the obscure stuff and the stuff that doesn't just go da-da-da-da-da-da. You want to kind of prove people wrong, for want of a better phrase. And I felt like that day, that evening, throughout that campaign, they proved people wrong. I mean, they went on a tour after that, didn't they? Did you go to it? Do let me know. I'd love to hear your memories of it, because the Roundhouse gig looked like great fun. They were joined by Rhino's son there. And it was a nice full sound. And to hear the strings and, Geraint Watkins is in the background there. And it just looked like great fun and a great time, and just emphasized again, Quo as songwriters rather than, 3 chords, all that stuff, all those jibes that you've heard. It's something that, while perhaps not, it was more commercial perhaps than it maybe needed to be, but then it almost needed to be commercial. It needed to reach out and show people, hey, look, they didn't just do Rockin' All Over the World and Down, they did All the Reasons and Claudie. Like, there would be people in that audience watching at home, listening at home, going, what is that song? That's beautiful. What a beautiful, like, country song. Is that a cover? They always do covers. No. No. It was written decades ago by Francis Rossi and Bob Young. Like, I think it just did a great job of emphasizing them as songwriters. And while there are moments where it could have been stripped back, a little bit more, stripped bare a tiny bit more, I think it worked. It caught the imagination, and they had another top 5 album in the UK. And just to talk about the UK chart success, 2014 was a really interesting year, because in the top 10 you had albums, not all at the same time, obviously, by Hank Marvin, Led Zeppelin, Dolly Parton. I think Vera Lynn had a number 1 album that year, becoming one of the oldest artists ever to have a number 1 album in the UK. And so Quo were part of that statistic that just because an artist is old doesn't mean that they can't be still relevant or selling in the modern age. So what do you think of Aquostic stripped bare? Were you, like me, a huge fan of the album and loved the reinvention of some of Quo's biggest hits and a few obscure ones besides? Or were you of a different opinion? Let me know in the comments below or via social media, and I'll see you again for another episode of the Quo-Cast.